Hey, what's up, Last in Line Nation? Hope everybody's doing well. We have got a blessing for you today. We have got a guest that I have just come to know, and through mutual friends and acquaintances, been connected. And man, am I glad we are, because this guy has quite a story, quite a background, and quite the experience. He's blessing the youth of our community. And I want to read his bio real quick before we dive into the meat and potatoes of this talk. So I've got Ahmard Vital with me today. He is a not only an author, but a motivational consultant, international speaker, mental performance coach for athletes. And he was a coach, or I'm sorry, he was a college football recruiting analyst with Fox Sports affiliate, scout.com, and also founded That Guy Media Group, where he expanded his platform to small business and nonprofit organizations. So he's been around the recruiting environments and high school, college. So Ahmard has developed several inspirational and motivational coaching programs that have been impactful to athletes as well as corporations. So in 2011, he published his first book called Awaken the Baller Within, and quickly labeled as the Athlete's Life Manual by members of the sports media. And then he published his second book in 2019 called I Am More Than Enough. And so currently he's working as a humanitarian and team ministry leader, volunteers his times to inspire youth in the area, youth to envision their futures beyond challenges and circumstances. And we have got quite an episode for you today. Ahmard, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me on with your group.
Yeah, and we talked off air, and you're battling a little bit of a voice. You lost your voice yelling the last couple of days, I guess, huh?
Yes, we had our team ministry. We have our summer fest going on, and it's all about getting the spirit stick. And I was leading some good chants for the teenagers, and our team ended up winning. However, the trade-off is that my voice is a little off right now. So
Yeah,
it's only been about 48 hours. So we're going to work through this as best we can
it'll be.
and make sure that we still get the message across as good as possible.
That's right. Well, it sounds good. Man, we're going to start this series. Well, this July and August, we're going to do this series called Conquer Your Enemy. And the N.M.E is narrative, masculinity, and elevation. And little unorthodox here with some of these topics, but I believe that as we peel back the layers of them, I think we're going to uncover some things that we see in society, in culture, in leadership, and in the men in our community that maybe we can start to broaden and start to empower and equip men to walk in their true calling, and leaders be leaders like we're supposed to be. So, man, digging in. But before I do, is there anything about you personally that I didn't read that maybe that could connect the audience with you a little further?
Man, I'm just steady trying to, really be on my purpose more than anything, what I'm called to do. I live by two words, service and impact. And I work very hard to make sure that every action I do in my life involves service and impact. I feel like we are all called here to serve no matter what you do. So I do want to make sure service is at the forefront of everything I do. And with that, I want to make impact. We see the climate that's going on, no matter, where you stand on, any different decisions and situations, but we all can recognize that there are some challenges ahead of us, and there always have been.
Yeah.
I think with, a lot of the things that's going on, whether it's social media and just mainstream and narratives and talking points, there's a big challenge ahead of us. And I think that it's up to gentlemen like yourself and many of our colleagues to take on those battles head on.
Yeah.
And so service and impact is the two things I try to
That's
live my
good.
life by.
That's
Everything else
awesome.
everything else is a beautiful bio. But
Yeah.
in between those bios, they don't show you what the struggles you went through to get to where you are. So it's a
Right.
beautiful thing. I accept it all, good, bad, and indifferent. So
Right. Yeah. Well, I think we need to get your take on a few things, and let's start with narrative. The cultural narrative, even some of the false personal narratives that we start to live by over the years. We start to hear these stories playing in our heads, right? And we buy the lie a lot of times whenever we're fed some of the things that aren't aligned to what God has called us to be, right? And so we fall into the trap of other people writing our storyline. And so talk about your personal experiences and maybe a life narrative that you caught yourself in the middle of that you had to sort of maybe deflect, and others were sort of writing your story for you and you were kind of receiving that. Like, can you talk about any experiences where the narrative got a little twisted?
absolutely. And I think that for this, we can probably go back to probably 2009. I was on the upswing with Fox. I had my job going, things were going well. I saved up a ton of money, bought a house at the age of 29, new car. I was a recruiting analyst for many of the major universities, including LSU, Texas, Oklahoma, schools across Texas Tech, things of that nature. And so I'm the guy. I'm the guy on the ground in Texas. And I'm making pretty good money at that time. 29 years old, bought a house,
Yeah.
got in here.
Yeah.
And within a week of me being in the house, I found myself in the guest bedroom just depressed.
Mm.
Like from the outset, I've reached the American dream, or if nothing else, I'm on track. And I remember sitting there and I went on a whirlwind. There was a relationship I was in that went completely awry.
Mm.
And I left that relationship not knowing what I did or what caused what had happened. And I let it affect me in the worst ways possible.
Mm.
And I remember I went on a week in there and I said, I tell you what, God, I'll make you a deal since I don't know what I'm doing right now. I say, God, I'll tell you what, if you wake me up tomorrow, I promise I'll work to live every day and have some meaning to it and follow your steps as opposed to mine. And obviously I woke up from that, and
Yeah.
that led me down a path to personal and spiritual development, started getting into books, hired a mentor. And of course, all of that led into me writing the first book, Awaken the Baller Within, which came out in 2011. I'm starting to really ascend more and not just using me as a Christian as a sidebar or something that I do on
Right.
Wednesdays and Sundays. I'm starting to express it more openly through the week and really trying to get into it. So I think that's where my turning point would
Yeah.
be if I had to have one turning point, but there's been multiple, but that was probably one of the first major ones where I really just didn't care about life and I had to lean not on my own understanding. But
Mm. Yeah.
obviously, God will never leave or forsake us. And so I was at that point and I was like, all right, you have the steering wheel because I don't have it. I don't know what I'm
Yeah.
doing.
Well, I mean, I imagine that a lot of people have come to that place in whatever fork in the road they're in, right? I imagine people, their version of sitting in the guest room depressed. I'm sure that there's different variations of that. But my question would be also if you could expand on talking to Christians right now who find themselves in that situation, right? Let's find out from you what you think. Why do we have a problem with our narrative when we're supposed to be grounded in the word? We're supposed to be grounded in what God says about us, right? You talk about it probably every day of your life to these kids, and I live it. And so as Christians, why are we buying those false narratives?
I've had some time to think about this for a little while, and obviously there's multiple answers, but let's just stick to one for now. I think the idea of faith for many of us is a huge conundrum, right? And let me explain where I'm coming from with that. Obviously, here it is, faith is for, basically hoping for things that are unseen, yet you have no clue when they're going to show up.
Yeah.
Because remember, it's not your time, it's God's time.
Yeah.
Well, even within that, we're still, professionals, we're still, active workers on the earth, and we want to see results,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And you got to remember, I was talking with my pastor about this the other day. I said, I can see why faith can be somewhat can be somewhat conflicting because, first God says, be still and know that I am God. And then it says faith without works is dead. And so you're just like, wait a minute. So do you want me to wait for the still small voice to tell me what to do? Like, what work do you want me to do while I'm waiting? And obviously, it can go much deeper than that.
Yeah.
But, I was thinking about that because I was like, God, I'd like you to order my steps.
Yeah.
However, am I on the right path right now? And I think that's where a lot of Christians maybe get caught up. And I think sometimes we're stuck between living in a current reality and having faith in what's not yet made itself known to us. That period between seed time and harvest time is not easy to deal with.
Right.
Christians, we deal with that. And I think the idea of trusting in God, and I think what ends up happening a lot of time as Christians, we trust enough to make us feel comfortable, right?
Sure.
It's like we don't want to just sell out completely because it's just like, all right, God, if I sell out completely, is this mortgage going to get paid? And I mean, I'm not asking no one to make that sort of decision, but there's times when we're at a serious crossroads in life.
Yeah.
And that is a place where, trusting and knowing and allowing, God to speak to you in a way that's going to be beneficial to you. You need to continue to stay in the word, allow it to speak to you, and always look for those clues where God is calling, talking to you. Those moments when you're just like,
I would also, add to that, even Christians or non-Christians, we all have triggers. And so that narrative can be dictated and can be influenced by certain triggers of our past. If it's a fear, if it's an insecurity, if it's a failure we've had, we can be locked into God, right? Going smooth in the current, right? In our rhythm. And then a trigger from something 10 years ago, we start believing this other narrative. All of a sudden, we've seen God work in our lives year after year. And then all of a sudden, one thing happens and we're trapped back in this narrative we were buying 10 years ago. So I think that's just an ongoing process of what you said, getting grounded, getting in the word, getting connected with him, and renewing our mind, of course, and then refreshing our view and our perspective on the true narrative. So we got to be in touch with that constantly. It's not a one-time thing. So I'm glad you went into some of that, because that just triggered that thought in my head. So let's move in, like our enemy, conquering our enemy. Like the M is masculinity. And I wanted to get your take on this too, because society, masculinity's taken on a whole new shape and size now with the way culture has tried to rebrand it, redefine it, and really change the narrative on masculinity. And as men, as strong Christian men who are called to lead courageously, provide, protect, do those things, be the warrior in society, love people, man, talk to me about the effects that you see culture having on us as godly leaders and men.
Wow, that's a loaded question, and really and truly, that could be a long form podcast. It can take quite a while, but we'll get right into it.
Sure.
And you're right. Like, men are called here to lead. We're here to provide and protect. The problem is that, and I think the word they use now is reimagine. Like reimagine, and it's just like, wait a minute, reimagine what? And it's obviously whatever you say. It's not really grounded in anything.
Sure.
And what I'm starting to see over time is that we're teaching adolescents, young men, to be dependent and not leaders, right? You're raised, many times, unfortunately, in a single parent situation, regardless of what way it goes, you're taught to be dependent. And not only that, it's like we are trying to go against biology with, hey, you need to get in touch with your feminine side. Oh, well, what does that even mean? And so if you're around, the opposite gender for so long, then you think that is what it's going to take. And what ends up happening is, and I was sharing this with a client of mine probably a couple of years ago, and she had hired me to work with her son, and going through the discovery process, it was interesting. I was just letting her talk. I was opening up. I was just like asking those questions. About 47 minutes in, she stopped and she just broke out crying in the middle of our session. And she said, "Oh my goodness, I'm basically hiring you to undo everything that I did. I caused all of this." She says, "I've held on to my son for so long. I've shielded him from danger for so long. I have kept him out of this." And I said, "Unfortunately, you're not alone." It ends up happening is that the young men are raised to not be the men a lot of the people who complain the most want, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
It's like you want them to be feminine and you want them to be, in touch with certain things, but then it's like you realize like that doesn't get anything done.
Yeah.
You run into a guy who's 27 years old and he doesn't know how to pick up a broom. He doesn't know how to pay his own bills. He doesn't even know how to go shop for his own groceries. He doesn't know how to do anything. And it's just like, okay, what are you good for in the open market? And in the media, like you said, the media is really attacking masculinity at all levels.
Sure.
The second, you stand up and, show some kind of what we would call grit, integrity, toughness, or whatever. It's just like, oh,
it's toxic.
You're one of them.
Yeah, it's toxic.
You're toxic.
Yeah.
You're one of them. Yeah. Well, when the enemy is coming at us, whether it's spiritual or whether it's an actual, adversary, I think whatever that toxicity is needed in that spot. And if you want to call it that, really and truly, it's like you said, just being a good, godly, grounded Christian man. That's really it. And I mean, even if you're not a Christian, just the fact that you're a man, takes care of your family, protects, women and children, which we are called to do and lead. I don't know. And I think it's been building up over time, but I don't know when we got to the point where just doing things that we're called to do, which the word tells us to do, which even secular things tell us to do, why all of a sudden that's toxic. I'm baffled by that. But yes, masculinity is under attack, and it is going to be up to gentlemen like yourself and our colleagues to change that narrative back. We don't have the reach of mainstream media, but we do have independent media and we do have our own lives. And of course, first and foremost, it starts with taking care of our own homes.
Yeah, that's great.
Building up our home, building soldiers at home. For me, with no soldiers in the house, building up my teams and pulling the young men aside and being like, no, we're going to go out here and I'm going to teach you to lead at the age of 12, 13, 14 years old. You will lead something. You will lead your own life and you will bring others with you, drawing nigh all of those soldiers who want to come and be part of the battle of taking back the traditional way of doing this thing called life. And it's a long, hard battle. And I ate my Wheaties and I'm ready to go.
I know. And that's what I was getting ready to say is you mentioned single parent homes, and that's not a unique concept, right? It's been going on for years. But yet I want to say that the reason, and I'm just generalizing this, right? I don't know details of people's lives and there could be all kinds of factors, but in my opinion, for the most part, men leave their families because they don't want to do the hard stuff. They don't want to buckle down, sink their feet in when things get a little rocky or friction start, they feel a little heat. I think guys have been known to just abandon ship, right? And just kind of hit the road sometimes. And what I've seen is what I'm speaking of. There are lots of things I haven't seen, and I'm not speaking about those. I'm speaking of the ones that I'm familiar with, of people that I've known over 49 years. And I just realized that what you said kind of hit home, that, man, we as guys, in order to get this masculinity thing back into rightful standing, we got to learn to do the hard stuff. We got to step into some of that friction. Talk about that, what I just said. Do you have anything to add to that? I mean, am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy, but there's more to it, if I may add.
A lot more, yeah.
Well, and you're right. Men have to get back on purpose. Men have to get back to life on purpose. on
Yes.
purpose with a purpose. I agree with that. However, by saying that, obviously that is a true and factual thing. However, let's look at the chicken or the egg.
Sure.
Where did men get that attitude from?
Exactly. Yeah. Modeling. What
So,
modeling was out there?
well, think about it. If you only have one piece of one, if a puzzle is two halves and you only have one piece of it, you're only taking in one side of the story.
Sure.
And I've seen this a lot in families these days, man. You look at those situations and you want to talk about how men are out of purpose or whatever. Let's look at the flip side of this situation. You see these young girls out here, teenagers and things like that. What are they taught to do? They're taught to go get as educated as possible, go focus on career, go focus on, making it, get you a house, all these things. Worry about marriage and a relationship later. And so what that does is that creates a culture where men are taught to not be so toxic. Women are taught to be more manly. And now what do you have? You have a conundrum. You have a full conundrum because everybody's out of order, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that women can't be educated. Please don't
Right.
get that
Right.
thought
No,
out there.
no. Yeah.
However, if we're going biblically, women are supposed to latch on to a man. Like life is not meant to be single for either one of us.
Sure.
However, if one side is overly masculine when being a nurturer is their primary function, if one is chose to lead and he's chosen to be dependent, what do we have? We have chaos. We have what we see right now. We have what we see right now. Lost men, empowered girls, and everybody's unhappy.
That's a great perspective right there. What you just said, like that whole breakdown was a great perspective, and I hadn't thought of it that way. But yeah, and like we said, we qualified all this by saying there are exceptions. We are not covering every single factor or situation. There are circumstances that are beyond certain people's control. I get it, but you're right on. Like what has twisted this thing upside down is what you said, and I believe, I think men can rise up in a godly way, in a healthy way. It doesn't mean to be domineering or dominant or dictatorship. We're not talking this. It's an equality versus equity type situation. Like men and women are created equal in God's eyes, but we don't have equitable duties or tasks or responsibilities, right? So there's just that could be a whole new separate talk. But no, I love the way and I don't want to add anything to it because I think you put it perfectly. So let's move into elevation. So narrative, masculinity, and now elevation. Let's talk about, and I feel like this is probably right in your wheelhouse as far as the second portion of this. But before we get into that, I want to hear what you have to say about when we falsely elevate ourselves. The P word is out there. The pride is where the fall is. Am I right? So talk about guys and some of the traps we fall into to stand on top of the mountain, beat our chest and hold the trophy and say, look at me. I think we elevate ourselves a little bit unjustifiably sometimes. Do you see that, or what are you seeing in young people too? Like I see, young people now that everything's glamorized on social media. What's your take on that?
Well, John, that's a great point that you brought out there, and I don't need to look too far. I can go look in the mirror, right? I've been there. That's the beautiful thing. That's one thing that I like to stand on is the fact that, like, hey man, like, where do you get your material from? I woke up this morning, and the idea is that when you the trap you fall into is that, let's just say you're praying and you're getting it and you're doing the work. You feel like you're on your purpose. You've quote unquote made it or whatever, and then you somewhere along the way you think, like, I created this, right?
Sure.
This is me. Like, look what I've done. When in actuality, like, all the gifts that come to us are from the Father. Like, yeah. But the second you start thinking that, like, you are leaning on your own understanding, your own intellect or whatever, and don't realize that, like, there are serious things going on behind the scenes within you.
Yeah.
The operating system headquarters,
Hmm.
the hierarchy of life, when you forget that this is not about you, then that's the biggest downfall. And of course, I was sharing with a young man the other day. He was talking about he was just downtrodden, he wasn't feeling it or whatever. And I was just like, I said, young man, what's the order of life? And he was like, I was like, do you know the order of life? And he was like, yeah. I was like, God, man, woman, children, hierarchy of life. I said, when you connect with your father on a purpose, everything else below you will fall into place. The problem is that we never consult with dad to get the purpose, to get the calling, and everything else, draws nigh unto you what you need. The problem is that we try to skip over that and say, all right, God, you gave me all I need. I got this. When you get into that, you're out of order. When you don't check in with dad, you don't pray, when you don't connect, when you don't listen to the still small voice, when you don't do all of those things, everything can go sideways very quickly.
It
and
can.
I think as men, again, why things are so out of order right now is because men are not listening to not only fathers of the earth, but they're not listening to their heavenly father at all.
Right.
So if you push both fathers away, what are you left with? Like you said, social media, mainstream media, disgruntled family, berating friends.
Yeah, narratives that never line up with the word and narratives that are never consistent. And I would add to that too, you talking about that. It's funny because it kind of goes back to masculinity. Like the real men actually take responsibility for their mistakes just as much as they do their victories. And the guy that you're talking about that's putting himself up there and he's taking credit for all this, you don't see that guy taking responsibility when things go south. That's part of the problem. We're quick to stand up on the top of on the podium and when things are good and we've done well, but man, when we miss it or we fall short, very few of us are raising our hands and saying, I own this. And to me, that's part of the masculinity piece that we're missing as well. But great point on that, on elevating ourselves. So let's go into what you do on a daily basis, man, and elevate others. You just said something in there that stood out to me about something bigger than yourself. You said that when we miss it, we've stopped making it about somebody else. And so talk about that. Talk about the keys in elevating other people and what qualities we have to dig into within ourselves and intentionally step into that role.
Absolutely. And obviously I work with all teams, but I will be the first to admit, and most people who are around me, like I do gravitate to the young man a little bit more because I know that the leadership of any place is going to start from the man.
Yeah.
And I want to build young men, and I think that there's a power vacuum with that.
Yeah.
And connecting and getting that God-given purpose is going to be ideal. As far as the work I do, obviously with the team ministry, mental performance coaching, a little bit of physical training as well. When I work one-on-one with people, obviously service and impact is going to be my two main things, regardless of what I do, whether it's for the service side, whether it's for a nonprofit side or for the business. I want to provide a service and create impact. And with that, the way I look at it now, as far as elevating others, when I go speak or I'm doing a platform where there's more than a few people in there, I say, God, give me two, just two. I say, give me one person who buys in and is ready to run and make something happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that second person is very important. Give me another person who not only buys in, ready to make something happen, but also wants to pick up the baton and take it forward. And my job at that point in time is to take that person and make them 2 to 4 times better than myself to go do the same thing for others.
Yeah.
So that's where I learned more of the service part of it and just being humbled and saying like, okay, God, I don't have the financial resources, yet you've given me a gift to connect with people, to speak, to write, to serve, go do community service, ministry. Show me, reveal to me how to use my gifts to be able to not only expand your kingdom, but to also provide the greatest service for other people.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things that I learned, where it was just like, serve first. And I think that's where a lot of people get the game wrong. A lot of times people say, when I get more, I'll give more.
Absolutely.
However, you'll never get more until you give. That's the whole thing in a
That's the
nutshell.
secret sauce right there. That's the faith journey right there.
Yes, you give. Because what does it say? To give from the overflow. Press down, shake it, shake it together, and and you're overflowing with goodness.
Yeah.
I know about 3 or 4 years ago, I was writing down my goals, and I said, you know what? One of my goals one day is going to be to donate $1 million. Not earn, donate $1 million to some causes. That's one of my first goals that I want to do, is be able to donate $1 million to a number of different causes all over the place. So that's the elevation.
Well, a friend of mine just sent me a picture of a note that he said taped up all over his wall. It says, dream big, start small. So you want to give $1 million. That's a great dream. And that's what I think will be a reality down the road, but we got to get there, right? It doesn't just happen overnight. We get there in small steps, and God's going to test us along the way and see if we're faithful with little, because it says, if you're faithful with little, he will bless you with much. Right. And too much is given, much is required. Right. So, man, I think it's a great perspective today. Before I let you go and doctor up that voice, man, where can they get your materials, your books, your website, that kind of thing? Talk about where we can access more of your resources.
Well, my website is www.ahmardvital.com. That's AHMARDVITAL.com. All of my material is there. Have a new clothing line on there. Right now, you all actually call me at a good time. I'm actually pitching my book to publishers right now. I got a new book coming out titled Now What? I started it in the middle of this pandemic, all this chaotic stuff, and I was driving down Grand Parkway, and I listened and I'd heard enough. And I literally made the outline for a new book while driving on Grand Parkway. Don't do that at home.
So good.
However, but I started making notes, and next thing you know, we have 35,000 words ready to go for a manuscript. And so we're in the process of vetting out some publishers and looking forward to that. Obviously, my other 2 books are on Amazon. I Am More Than Enough, 3 Ways to Overcome the Fear of Your Own Reflection, and Awaken the Baller Within, both there. And there's a lot of other things. If your people want to send me a message, I have several audio programs that are on actual physical CDs, which I'm going to get. And I'm going to have an audio section of the website soon enough, after I get a couple of these projects off of the shelf. But cool. Connecting with more youth. I'm a youth empowerment speaker. That's where I'm called. I love corporations. I love small businesses. But I feel like that there's 3 places where my focus needs to be, and that's sports, spirituality, and small business. But I can tell you what, the first 2 probably take precedent over the last. The impact made on the youth today, I think that is where there's been too many signs where that's where God is really calling me to be. And just sort of sell out to that idea is just trying to figure out how to make it all work. But it's just like, you start realizing, like, if you just do the work, God will figure out a way to make sure all your needs are met.
Absolutely.
And I think that's sort of where, my intellect and my, faith are clashing a little bit. And so just trying to work through all that. But ahmardvital.com is there. And if your people send me a message through my contact form, and they put last line leadership, I'll send them an ebook copy of this book here, I Am More Than Enough.
Nice.
Tell them to reference this podcast, and I'll send them a free ebook of a free electronic book of that. Of my book.
That's nice of you. I appreciate that. You audience, you heard him put last in line in the comments. And you know what? So go to his website, get his materials. His books are Awaken the Baller Within and I Am More Than Enough. And we're looking forward to seeing the new one called Now What. Ahmard Vital, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for making time. A little bit under the weather voice, but man, you pressed through and you brought it big time. And I appreciate it. Audience, until next time, he's been Ahmard Vital. We've been Last in Line. Be blessed.